Hello and welcome to this new terrain breakdown inside Gaia. Today we have this snowy field with some ice. For this particular terrain I made two graphs, one for the terrain itself, which means the general shape and the colors. And then we have the snow inside the second graph. Let's start as always with the shape. I started out with a slump node. Slump is useful to create hills as well as valleys because in my opinion is a more powerful version of the multifractal primitive. You have two noise styles. First one is your base and the second one is the slump, which means the higher parts of your terrain. If you play around with them and with the seed, you will get a nice result. Scale is also very important. The lower the scale, the more details you will have in your terrains and it will be more clumped. On the contrary, if you have a higher scale value, you will get a valley-like terrain or a field. In this case, I used a value of 57%. Then I made a ridge node, which is useful to create mountain ranges. I changed the scale, the seed to find something I liked, and I also changed the scale on the X direction so the mountains are elongated toward the horizontal line. I combined the two with a blend 60% and we have this mix of a valley with mountains in between. To make it more random, I created a displace node. I changed the strength, the scale, also the iterations to have more details, and then fractal terraces to increase the separation between the various shapes. In this case, I lowered the shape value, so the ground will become higher and the peaks will become lower. If you notice, this is before, this is after. Is a subtle difference, but it works. Then a recurve node. Recurve is mainly used to create rocky details on the mountain ranges to give them a more, I wouldn't say fantasy look, but more chaotic for sure. Default settings aside the mode that is set to duo, which means it goes in two directions, so X and Y. I then placed an erosion node. I used a preset here and it was the large mountain range, if I'm not mistaken. But in any case, you can see the setting here. I then used the carver to create breaks on the surface, default settings aside the seed, and also I lowered the influence to 40%, so it's not so strong. I placed another erosion node, which is the new wizard node. It's just a simplified version of the erosion node. Set it to fast erosion, and I think it's everything to default aside the channel width and the deposits, because I wanted soil in my terrain as well as cracks. And talking about cracks and breaking on the surface, I added a breaker node to emphasize those breakage. Default settings, and finally anastomosis, which is a very powerful node, is one of my favorite, and as you can see it makes a drastic difference. This is before, this is after, and we are only at 2K resolution. 4K is even better. If you don't know what anastomosis is basically to emphasize all the crevices or flows, pits, whatever you want on your terrains. In this case, I chose rivers to emphasize the cracks created by the breaker node as well as the natural formations of rivers that maybe exist in the past, and this is it for the shape. I then mark it for export and pin it, so for texturing later on. And regarding the anastomosis, I simply change the impact, so the breakage are stronger, and the flow width, so I get larger crevices. Let's now take a look at the snow, because before texturing the terrain, I always create the snow, water, or whatever I must create. In this case, only the snow. So let's go to the snow graph. To create the snow, simply use a snowfall node. You can find it here. So right click and snowfall. You have various inputs. The first one is what you want for your terrain. So in this case, my last node is the anastomosis. So I made a portal and link it here. You also have snowfall. This acts as a mask to determine where the snow will occur. Melt, you can create a sunlight if you want. Here, data and sunlight, which, as the name implies, is the position of the sun. You can connect it here in the melt input with the anastomosis portal for the input of the sunlight, and basically it will tell the snowfall where the snow is more melted. This terrain I wanted to cover everything with snow. I simply change the settings, as you can see here. Now this is a preset. I don't remember if it's the large snow field or spring remnants, one of these two. But in any case, these are the settings. So intensity to 53, settle to 100, and melting to 8%. Scale, it's not the real scale, as you can see. I don't usually use presets. I just personalize the snowfall as I want it to be, but sometimes they are useful and quick. For example, dirty snow is fantastic in my opinion. And regarding the outputs, you have the snow, which determines the color. I simply connected a clutter node with the preset of check for snow, and that's it. For the mask, for some reason the mask is not showing, but in any case I used a blur node connected to the hard output of the snowfall, set to 0.1 because by default is very hard as a mask and I don't like it, so I blur it a little bit, and I made a portal for both of them. Let's now take a look at the final stage of our terrain, which means texturing. I created a texture node, default settings, rock map, which I blurred and inverted just to have the two versions of the mask. Flow node with secondary and tertiary flows enabled. I connected a warp node to the secondary and I changed the size to 4%, strength to 20%, so we get this nice randomized and casual look that looks more natural. I also increased the iterations to 3. I duplicate it, and this is the exact copy connected to the tertiary output but with a different seed. And finally the angle, which I change the mean so we get more dark areas, and I connected a blur node set to 0.5 for the power. The angle node is an unique node and it doesn't always work because it can easily break your terrain in terms of coloration, but I'll show you that in this case it works really well. Let's start with the texture node. Now this is the base for our terrain to define the general look of the mountains and valley. So I wanted obviously an icy looking field, so I chose a set map that resemble it. I made a second set map for the valley, combine the two with a blend 50%, and we get this result here. I made another set map, which in this case I used for the rocks. So I connected it with a combine node and set it to multiply to get more contrast, as you can see. 40%. If you go higher, you will get darker areas. Another set map and another rock map, I think, yes. This is the same rock map as before, the inverted one, connected to the combine node with blend mode 100%. So we get these white areas on the mountains, clearly separate them from the field. I started texturing the flows, which means the breakage on the surface in this case, because we don't have rivers. I chose an bluish looking set map, combined it, and I used the flow secondary warp here, connected to the mask. Mode set to SQRT, which always give you a white result unless you choose a very strange set map. 40%. Then we have another combine node, and for the mask I used the flow tertiary. For the set map I chose still a bluish tone but with a lot of contrast and some white and yellow areas, and this is the result with a blend 80%. Then we have one last combine node, which is the angle. For the set map I chose this strange looking set map and combine it with the other combine node, blend 50%, and as you can see we get that icy look that I wanted. This is before, this is after. You have this really nice thin layer of blue tone that looks like ice. Perform some color correction with the color effect node. As always, equalize to 2% to avoid any possible RGB artifacts. Lightness to 1.2, so the colors are brighter, and contrast to 15%. I then combine everything with our snow. If you notice, I used a color effect. This color effect is only used to lower the lightness of the snow, because here I have the snow color portal applied to the input, which is this one, the clutter node, but by default is too bright. I'll show you. By default it looks like this, and if we combine it using the snow mask, which is this one, it's very bright. I mean, you could go with it, but in my opinion is way too bright and doesn't look realistic. So what I did is simply lower the lightness to 0.8, so we get this nice looking result. It's way better in my opinion. So this is without the snow, this is with the snow. Okay, so this concludes our breakdown. I hope you enjoyed it. If it's the case, leave a like to support the channel, subscribe to stay up to date with the latest contents. If you have any question, comment below, and I see you in the next one.